How are you doing, Maria? It's so good to be speaking to you.
It's so good to be speaking. I was just saying before you came on, I was saying hello to everybody from all over the globe, which is so exciting to me that here we are and we have the world with us
I
today.
know it's incredible what modern technology has done. Like we're
It,
all here in this one
it,
moment.
isn't that beautiful? And
Yeah.
I have to say that I know many of them are here to hear from you because I'm here to hear from you. I'm here to hear from my friend, who was my friend before he even knew he was my friend, who was a guide for me before he even knew he was a guide for me. And he sent me his new book and he told me about it. It's called Lighter. And it says, let go of the past, connect with the present, expand the future. Who does not want to do all of that? But he said to me, I guess it was a couple of months, you reach out and said, this book is coming out. I said, sign me up. I want to talk to you. We wanted to excerpt it in the Sunday paper because I believe that the words you're putting out, the guiding that you're doing is one part of how we're changing the world. So thank you for being here.
Oh, yeah, your words mean so much to me. Thank you. Yeah, I'm so grateful that we have our friendship and thank you for receiving Lighter. And yeah, I'm excited to speak to you right now.
Well, you said that this was the book you always wanted to
That's
write.
right.
I told you that we spoke about your other books, which I loved, but you said this is the book you wanted to write. I know you wanted to write the other books as well, but what did you want to say in this book that you had not been able to say in your other books?
This one meant a lot to me because it just had everything that I've been reflecting on, I think, since 2017. So I started writing in about 2014, but it took me a while to gather my voice, to figure out which topics are really important to me, and to really kind of just like figure out my craft as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then around 2017, I started realizing, okay, like these are, this is what I want to talk about, the personal, sort of transformation that we can all partake on, and also relationships and how that connects to our global transformation that's really more possible than ever because so many people are healing themselves.
But that's what I think is so important because this is not you're not writing so that somebody can go in the corner and do their work. You're
Mhm.
tying this, which is something I always try to talk about, that our healing heals us and it actually heals the world. So how do you connect that? How do you connect self-love, self-acceptance, non-judgment? How does that make our world better?
I think you hit it right on the dot with starting with self-love, right? So one thing that I found that was happening within myself and with the people around me who started doing their deep work is that when their self-love increases, uh, there is much less interest in harming others. They're much less willing to harm others. And I think when you multiply that by millions and millions of people who are actively developing their self-love, they're just going to tolerate less harm for themselves and for other people. So I feel like today we actually have this moment where a healing generation is arising because healing has become more accessible than ever before. I think there are just so many people who are accessing Eastern modalities, Western modalities, indigenous modalities, and they're really seeing significant transformations in their minds, in their hearts, and that makes big changes in their actions and their creativity so that they can look at old problems and come up with new solutions.
When you say that we're kind of giving birth to a healing generation, I want to be clear that you mean that like I can be in that healing generation,
All
and
of
you
us
can,
are alive today. Yes.
all of us who are alive. So it's not
Mhm.
just a young person's
No.
movement, and it's also super important because healing wasn't something that was spoken about if you're around my age or even younger than me. That wasn't something. Self-love wasn't in our toolbox. Our
Right.
parents didn't talk to us about self-love. So when you're talking about a healing generation, do you think that that's happening because people are in so much pain, or are the words now more available?
I think something especially within the last 10 years, right? Because meditation's been around for thousands of years.
Right.
Western therapy has been around for like around 100 years now or so. Um, but I think recently with the advent of the wellness movement, I think misery has gone out of style. I think people have really just
I love.
And it sounds a little funny, right? But I think people realize that there's this tension inside them and they don't want to just continue living with it. They want to find something that helps them relieve that tension so that they can live just happier lives, freer lives, and have deeper relationships because of that.
I love that you wrote in the book because you talk about kind of coming to this low moment in your own life, which
Hmm.
came because you were really numbing yourself with drugs and you were lying there on the floor and you thought, like my parents did
Yeah,
not sacrifice all of this so that I could end up on the floor dying from drugs.
right.
And that really that it was your parents wanting to respect your parents, wanting to make your parents proud that turned your life around. I mean, you turned your life around, but gave you the like, no, I can't do this to my parents. You don't hear that a lot though today.
Yeah, I feel like in that moment where really felt my life slipping, I felt like my heart was exploding. I remember I couldn't get up off the floor and I was there for like I think like 2.5 hours just like on the edge. I spoke to a doctor later and she said that it sounded to her like a mild heart attack, what I described to her. And I in that moment I remembered the sacrifice that my parents made. Like I was born in Ecuador and my parents decided that there would be more opportunity for us in the United States. So we moved here when I was about 4 years old. And when we got here, it was tremendously difficult for them, for all of us, but for them because they were holding the house together.
Yeah.
And my mom, she worked cleaning houses. My dad worked in a supermarket. And I remember vividly how much, pretty much every month they were trying to figure out how to pay rent, how to put food on the table. And I remember that they were doing that for my brother and I, and later my sister was born as well. But that determination that they had, I think it just inspired me to make sure to return that favor to them in some way because they gave so much to me. I wanted to be able to give to them, and I wanted to just do something with my life as opposed to just fizzling out.
I love that because I also feel like, that kind of making my parents proud was something that I grew up with. And I think, making your country proud, making your parents proud, making your community proud, that goes once you're kind of healing yourself, as you talk about here, you can't help but wanting to make your family proud, your community proud, and your country proud. So I love how that's so connected because it's our country also that needs self love, right? That needs healing. That doesn't mean it's perfect. That doesn't mean we should look past mistakes that have been made, but healing is required for all of it, right?
It really is, and it's required globally. I think that's something that all of us can really embody because whether we've experienced serious trauma or not,
Yeah.
heavy emotions have accumulated in our minds, and those heavy emotions they predispose us to reacting in that same manner again and again. So, I like to study history, and one thing that I see over and over is that when people who want to change the world, when they gain power, often power functions like a magnet that pulls on the roughest parts of the ego. And these rough aspects of the ego will oftentimes make the people who are trying to change the world into a better place actually recreate the thing that they were originally fighting against. And I feel like this time in history, we have a new opportunity, where we can actually deal with our egos, deal with the heaviness that we carry so that we don't so that we don't continue recreating those same ills over and over again.
I love that. And now my whole book is underlined, and this book, I want to keep going, really stressing it. It's an easy book, but a profound book. And those
Mhm.
two things can go together. It's the kind of book you can read for 10 or 15 minutes, put it down, pick it back up, think about it. And he, at the end of each chapter, he gives you questions to think about. Why did you want to do that? I think that's such a great idea. I wanted to read it. I just have to find where I underlined it.
Yeah, I thought of it as an opportunity for connection, either with yourself or like ideally, I was thinking that, it could be people in conversation with their friends or with their intimate partners or family members,
Yeah.
because I think creating a space where you can just really be open about like where you are in your journey, like, what habit you're trying to build, what you're trying to let go of, and just having these discussions can create like a space for authenticity that can be really nourishing. So
Yes. So he puts here, like, for example, at the end of this chapter, he's like, what does self-love look like for you right now? So it actually makes you stop at the end of the chapter. You have to actually stop and think about, what does that look like? Then he said, how do you want your self-love to evolve? And what do you want it to feel like a year from now? So I looked at both of us, I was like, damn, I actually have to think about that now. I have to project myself forward, but it was a good exercise for me. What part of yourself do you have trouble accepting? And Juan Pueblo writes a lot in here about learning to accept all the parts of oneself, the parts that we don't like, our shadow, as some have called it, right? And having compassion for the whole self.
yeah, and I think that's I mean, acceptance itself is like probably one of the most difficult but most powerful things that we can bring into our lives, because when you turn that lens inward and you're looking at the entirety of your emotional history, there are going to be things that make you proud, and then there are going to be things that are, can strike fear in you. But if your self-love is going to make a serious change in you, then you have to just brave this world inside of yourself with that courage of acceptance, because without it, a lot of progress won't be made. I think acceptance itself is like the key to letting go.
Right. So letting go is, 2 words, easy to say. They've had, songs about it. And I've struggled with it a lot. And I know so many people have struggled with it. And once you think you've got it, boom, it comes right back up. And how have you found letting go? Is it that you got easy with it? Did you kind of stop judging it and just allow it to dissipate or dissolve?
First, we have to give ourselves credit, right? Because we have been geared towards attachment our whole lives. So, how many times have we been attached with some situation or another, craving something that wasn't there, or hating something that was there? So, these are all different forms of attachment that we've repeated countless, countless times in our lives. So, when we start embracing letting go, it's not just going to happen overnight. Like, it's going to require that same level of repetition. So that's why I try to write often that letting go you'll have to do it over and over again, multiple times, especially if the pain was deep. You'll have to repeat it. You'll have to, repeat the act of letting go. And I think for me personally, it's been through accepting the present moment and learning that through meditation, through Vipassana, that I've been practicing for the past 10 years. And I'm not perfect at it, right? I still will catch myself getting attached to things that are causing tension in my mind, but I try to be patient with myself, and that gentleness helps me just come back to the present and let it go.
So many of us did not grow up with gentleness. We boomers, came out of parents who were, signed up for World War II, came out of the Depression. They're like, we're tough, you need to work. Gentleness was not in the vocabulary. What advice do you have for people, let's just say my age or younger, who did not grow up with gentleness, who were not part of the healing generation, and who were part of a, work generation, bootstrap it up generation, to allow for tenderness, to allow for gentleness in one's life?
I feel like gentleness is possible if you slow down. I think that's like one of the key things, is like there's no opportunity for gentleness if you're like immediately reacting with what you've known in the past, with how your parents treated you or how you felt things before. So if you're able to sort of slow down so that you have a moment to think, a moment to say, okay, this is what the situation is at hand. This is how I would have reacted in the past. But I know that reacting in this way that just increases the tension, it's not going to help. So let me try something new. And often the new approach is gentleness. It's either like, walking away from it, or dealing with what's happening in front of you without sort of creating more fire where there already is a lot of fire, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So putting out a book like this for most people would be nerve-wracking, would produce a lot of anxiety, would stress one out. How do you kind of put a book like this out that you hope, you say in the beginning of the book, you hope this is a tool, is a part of this larger healing, that it will help on a larger scale, which is a pretty big ambition. How do you kind of keep yourself even, gentle, loving, calm?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mixture of two things. It's one is boundaries. Like I only say yes to what feels right and what I can actually do. So like I know in the beginning of, creating sort of like the marketing for the book, and my, publishers wanted me to do all these events and all these things, and I was like, no, no, we're gonna have to cut that down by a third. Because I can only really like actually show up and be present with you right now. Like I can't do that if I'm exhausted,
Yeah.
so I have to only say yes to what I can. And then besides that, I continue meditating every day, so I do my 2 hours of meditation a day. And that is critical to me, just, staying in touch with the truth of impermanence, and that truth that everything is always changing just helps me weather the storms when they're there, and it helps me appreciate what's right in front of me better than before.
You were saying that if there's one thing you could distill everything down to, it would be to accept impermanence, that
It's everything.
it's
Everything. Yeah.
everything. So expand on that a little bit, would you? Because every day, I think certainly coming out of COVID, and we spoke, way back kind of in COVID, that people wanted, they were all saying, when's it going to go back? When is it going to be normal again? When can we, go back to what was? And you talk a lot about that's the past, right?
Yeah.
Everything is changing, always will. And one has to become comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think the truth of impermanence is interesting, because a lot of the tension that we feel in our minds, it comes from us rejecting change. There are things that we love and we want to keep them the same all the time. And then there are things that we don't like and we never want to see them. We never want them to happen. But the reality is that you can only control you and your actions. Everything else is like, like a question mark. You don't know what's going to happen next. So the reality is that nature continues flowing with this change, right? Everything is changing at the atomic level, the physical level, the mental level, and this is totally universal. Like change is always there. So what that means is that we're better off trying to flow and embrace change, like flow with the change, as opposed to trying to fight against it. Because if it's just you standing against the river of reality that's moving and changing, you're going to lose, right? If you're fighting that change. So as opposed to causing that mental struggle for yourself, embrace it as much as you can.
I think what you're also saying, which I love, is that, you're very successful and you're also able to implement boundaries that don't harm your success.
Yeah, and
Right.
I'm also trying my best to just like success is, it's like another fleeting thing. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next. So I'm
Yeah.
here, I'm doing my best with what's happening in front of me, and who knows what I'll be doing 10 years from now.
Right. But I think there's this kind of, and it's very American too, in a way, like you have to work so hard or you won't be successful. You have to
Mhm.
outmaneuver the next person or you won't be successful. Or I don't have, I hear it all the time from a lot of the young kids that come over to my house. I don't have 20 minutes to meditate. And you just said you meditate for 2 hours a day. You say, no, I can't do all that. I'll do
Mhm.
this. So how can people get to a place where they don't feel they have to work 24 hours a day, where they can give themselves the gift of meditation, where they can give themselves the gift of boundaries, knowing that it's not only good for them, but it makes you a better parent, a better leader,
Yeah.
a better global citizen?
I think we have to detach ourselves from having our value be defined by our productivity. I think that's one of the sort of the great things about um, like what created our civilization, but at the same time we're letting capitalism define how fast we're moving, and I think that causes a lot of mental health issues where we're just
Yeah.
constantly trying to move fast. There are no breaks, so I can't rest. This idea of this hierarchy that isn't necessarily totally real, and this idea that I have to be at the top of it, like it's also something I'm imposing on myself. But being able to realize that you can be productive in a way that's healthy for you, for the things that matter to you, but you don't need to be moving at someone else's speed. It doesn't need to be a competition. And I found that personally in my work, like, saying no has actually been really valuable. Like saying no has actually aligned me with really good people that once like they appear, I'm like, yes, like this is a person my intuition feels like a yes. Or saying no to certain things has brought really good opportunities in front of me. So it's a mixture of like understanding your innate value and simultaneously not letting your value be defined by what you produce.
So knowing your innate value comes back to, as you were saying, loving yourself, seeing yourself
Hmm.
as worthy, seeing yourself in
Totally.
tender, compassionate light. And therefore, not only will you harm less, you will harm yourself less.
Oh yeah, and if you notice that you're moving at this like unsustainable speed, then you're not just going to end up tired, you're going to end up deep tired, like, you know, a level of exhaustion where you just can't show up for the people around you, or you can't do the things that you love. So I think we have to be careful with our attention and our energy because I mean our attention our itself is it's a really precious resource.
You've also said in the past, and I know you've written about this, is that the space that you have on Instagram is a sacred space for you.
Hmm.
You take that, you approach it with a sense of duty and a sense of honor, that this, you don't just throw up words or you don't just let someone else throw it up there. How I try to do on a smaller level the same. You know, this is a sacred space. I try to talk to people that I think are trying to move individuals and humanity at large forward. How can people begin to see their platforms? Because everyone
Hmm.
has one, right? If it's 5 people, 10 people, it doesn't matter, right? And you have a very large platform, but how do you help people see it as sacred?
I think that's a great question. I've never been asked that, but I feel like one of the ways that I sort of keep my space feeling good is that I've never done ads, right? So I'm like constantly saying no. Like people will offer things in my email, and I'm like, no, thank you. Like it's different from getting a gift from someone or someone has a book and they send it to me. You know, that's totally different.
Yeah.
But someone trying to pay me for like ad space, I'm like, no, thank you. You know, like that's not what I'm trying to do with my space because people come, you know, they come for points of reflection. And that's one thing that I do personally for my space. But I think for the people who like, you have to realize that people are giving you their attention willingly. So you have an opportunity to curate something for them and do that in a way that shows that sort of 10-15% of yourself that you actually want to show online. Because a lot of us, like, I think there was an era in the internet where people were showing way too much of their lives and they were like showing you what they're having for lunch and what they're having for dinner and they're on their walk with their dog and you're just constantly seeing their lives. But now that's sort of slowed down and it's like, okay, which small part of you do you want to show that could potentially help rejuvenate other people around you? And I think that's quite the gift we can give to each other.
I love that. You know, you talk here, this is, you know, on one of the pages, 182, where you talk about partners and people that you're, you know, in relationships with. You say, what aspects of old relationships are you committed to not repeating again? You talk a lot about, you know, being sitting there and thinking about what, once again, do you want to let go? What do you not want to bring into the relationship? How is your practice of listening selflessly going? Can you focus on the other person's words without immediately thinking about how you will respond? And I just want to kind of wrap up talking about listening,
Yeah.
active listening. I went to hear Thich Nhat Hanh many years ago. He came and spoke, and it was his birthday yesterday. So I was reading um, couple things of his, and he talked about kind of the active deep listening and the stories that we have about, you know, fights that we've had, traumas that we have, and that if we can actively deeply listen to another person without judgment, without jumping in and saying you're wrong, or trying to solve the fight, but that's actually what dispels anger, what dispels tension, and what might give rise to not only a new version of ourselves, but new relationships, that we can repair relationships.
That's really beautiful because I've been really inspired by Thich Nhat Hanh too. And I know he talks about understanding as a form of love.
Yeah.
And I was really inspired by that because I would see that playing out within my own relationship with my wife. Like there was a moment where there was a big shift because whenever we would have arguments, one of us used to try to win. And the argument would last longer and longer because it was just like who was going to win. But when we shifted that into I want to understand you, right? I want to understand where you're coming from. And we would take turns, she would say her part, I would say my part, and we would do our best to listen selflessly, not really responding, but just trying to take in, like, what was happening to you from your point of view. And it was funny because the moment where I was really able to understand her and she was able to understand me, there was nothing else to be said. Nobody won. We both won. And that understanding just lifted all of that tension. And I think it's really powerful to try to, the next time that you have some sort of argument that arises, try to understand each other as opposed to winning.
Oh, wow. I love that. And you could, if you're not in a relationship and you say, well, I don't have a partner to try that out with, you can do that with anybody.
Yeah.
I think what you're speaking about is really yes, you can do it in an intimate relationship. You can do it in a platonic relationship that's also intimate. You can do it in a work relationship, because there's always, I have found, and I'm much older than you, that there's so much misunderstanding, which causes so
Totally.
anger, right? And eventually you get there and you're like, what were we mad about?
Yeah.
20 years have gone by, and what was the fight about, right? And kind of, if you proactively, as you're saying, take on deep understanding in any relationship, everything shifts, because you're not trying to win, as you just said.
Yeah, and I think that's like, it just makes the arguments, because arguments will arise, right, in any
Yeah.
sort of situation, because that's what tends to happen with egos. Like when they rub up against each other, there's a potential for friction.
Yeah.
But I think it's not only a gift for yourself and for the other person, but it just makes the argument so much more efficient, because nobody's winning. It's just like, I want to know what's going on. How did this all affect you? And I think it's a beautiful thing. It's hard to practice, but like we said earlier, with repetition, you develop the skill.
Yeah, and he talks, I mean, all of these, accepting difficult moments, what is emotional maturity, and how to develop it, and listening. And several of you said, what is the name of the book? The book is called Lighter. It just came out. Let go of the past, connect with the present, and expand the future. What do you mean by that? Finally, expand the future. Is that expand how you see?
Yes. Yeah. So expand the future is when we don't embrace our healing, what often happens is that we keep repeating the past over and over again. So that makes the potential for our future very narrow. And when we let a lot of that go, when we release that tension so that our minds are lighter, it's just a world of possibility opens up for us.
I just want to find a couple of people on here who said, like, I have trouble with my parents. My parents don't understand me. My parents blame me. And you talk about that. Can you speak just for a moment to people? It seems like a lot of young people have trouble with their parents, and cross generations seem to be speaking in different languages, in different things. And it just, quite a few people have come through here with that.
Yeah, I think probably one of the best things that we can do, and this might sound counterintuitive, but it's when you lean on your own healing, when you take your healing seriously, and you either are building with a therapist, or you're enhancing yourself with your meditation practice, you'll find that that will ultimately change your interaction with your parents. So even if they're difficult or they're stubborn, if you re-enter it, with more patience, if you re-enter the situation with more compassion, you'll actually find that you will end up bringing newer things out of them. And that's something that I found within myself, was that the relationship with my parents was the same for year after year after year. But then when I started doing my inner work, and I brought more love and more compassion, more patience into the relationship, it just transformed. And it wasn't like my parents were doing their own work yet. It was just that because I changed, it was like the play changed. And that I found that quite helpful, and our relationships are much deeper now.
That's so beautiful, because so many people often say, well, I'm not going to change because that person didn't apologize.
They need to change, right?
They need to change,
Yeah.
right? And then taking control of our own healing, which is what this book is. It's a tool. And he's really kind of, it feels like this is a lifetime of work. It's a lifetime that has led to this deep observation, deep meditation, and deep lessons in here. And all we can do at the end of the day is be responsible for our own healing.
Totally.
And you were just saying, people shift when they see something in us that has shifted. People become, how'd you do that? How does
Yeah,
that happen? I want to try that. So instead of forcing somebody into change, be the change, right? Is what you're advocating.
totally. And it all goes back to Lao Tzu. I think he said it
Yeah.
best. You know, he wanted to awaken the world, but then he realized he just needed to awaken himself, and that thus inspired other people.
Yes, as Rumi too, right?
Yeah.
When I wanted to change the world, and then I realized I just needed to change myself. Well, I love speaking to you. I love talking to you as we talk about Rumi, as we talk about Thich Nhat Hanh, as we talk about Lao Tzu, that you're in that company. And we're also lucky to have your writings, which I turn to. I want you to know I turn to them all the time, and they make me smile. Sometimes I'm irritated because I'm like, damn, like, damn, like find yourself a partner who's emotionally mature, who wants the best for you. I'm like, what? I'm like, okay, swipe. But I just think you're putting such great wisdom, such great healing out into the world. And I know it's coming from your work, from your own healing, which is always the best thing. It is your purpose, your passion, and you put it out to benefit us all. And who does not want to be lighter, right? As you said, misery is so yesterday. So is this feeling of like, oh my God, the future is doom. If we can't enjoy or find some way to be present and be joyfully present in this moment, the future will be all doom and gloom.
Yeah, and we have the opportunity to change things around. I think, this century we have a lot of growing up to do, but I have more hope than ever because it really is millions and millions of people around the world who are actively healing themselves. And the first changes, like we see them in our personal lives. But yeah, thank you, Maria. Like I'm always so grateful for your support and the fact that, you find service in my books, that they actually serve you well.
Yeah, they do.
And yeah, I just,
And I give them out. I want you to know I gave them out as birthday presents to all my girlfriends.
thank you so much. That's so kind of you.
I wrapped them up and said, I want to share these books with you because they've been so helpful to me, and you can follow him and read them. And I have to tell you, people come back to me all the time like, oh my God, I didn't know. Like, thank you for introducing him. As my generation, but everybody else knows about you. But I'm so proud of you. The book is lighter. A lot of people say, will we save this conversation? We will. I don't know, we'll put it up on YouTube, right? What will we do, Madison, with this conversation? We'll put it up, we'll put it back up in the Sunday paper, and so that a lot of people said that they would like to revisit it, so we will do that, and we'll let you know how we do that. But and then you can obviously follow him, and he's on a book tour now. Yes, you can give this book for Christmas. That is such a great give this book for Christmas to anybody that you love. And not that you want them to heal, but because it's been helpful to you. That's the bottom line. God bless you. And
thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining us for this beautiful conversation with such a beautiful human being. Thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.